Hi, I'm Fatu, and this is Dinner Party History. It's been a while, but I'm not even going to go into my long diatribe of why I've been gone, where I'm going, what I'm going to do next. I just want to do a quick little rundown and then get back into things. Um, Crazy things have happened in the past couple months. The last episode was recorded by the end of May, and that was when I had just left my corporate 9 to 5 job. And then right before that, I was like hyper fixated on the World Cup, doing so much of the World Cup. I actually went to 2 World Cup games. I went to USA versus Paraguay, and I also went to France versus Senegal, which was the game of a lifetime, the match of a century that I'm so happy I was able to go to. Shout out to my friends that took me there. But then right after I left that France Senegal game in New York, I went straight to Paris, where I was for a month. A little longer than I expected, but I was gone for a month because I'm like, you know what? It's been a crazy year. So much has gone down. Let me go back to my favorite place, Paris, and seek some refuge. And I watched the World Cup there. Thought France was going to win. They did not win. And it's very interesting because today's subject of the episode, Mobutu, um, famous Congolese dictator, which people like to debate, but we're not going to debate that. That man was a dictator. Speaking of dictators, people love to call my GOAT, my favorite player, Kylian Mbappe, they love to call him a dictator, and his teammates even jokingly called him Mobutu. So today we're going to talk about the real Mobutu, and it's funny when, his teammates call him that. Well, what Mobutu did to Congo is actually not funny at all, and this is going to be a wild, wild ride. As I was studying for this podcast, it honestly just made me so depressed. Anytime I make an episode about the dictators, like it just like wow, this is really fucking sad. But without any further ado, you know, let's get into Mobutu. Fatu rhymes with Mobutu. Let's get into it. Mobutu was born not Mobutu Sese Seko. He was actually born Joseph Desiree Mobutu, but I'll get to the name change later. And he was born the 14th of October, 1930. So the 4th of October, 1930, that would make him a Libra. He didn't seem to have very many Libra qualities, at least to my knowledge. So he was born out of wedlock in a very remote village in northwestern Congo. This was during, of course, the Belgian colonial rule. And his mom was kind of like a part of like this, I don't want to use the term harem, but a part of a group of women in the village that were married to the chief of the village. Married is a loose term, but they were with the chief of the village. And before Mobutu, she was actually pregnant with twins, but then tragically she lost the twins. And again, because this is early 20th century in Africa, it's very easy to understand why somebody would believe witchcraft was involved. But she did believe that witchcraft was involved in the loss of her unborn children, the twins, and so she wanted to flee the village because she thought it was by the rival wives that she was sharing the chief with. And apparently, according to Mobutu, she was the baddest in the village. So I can see why maybe people were plotting on her. But after that happens, she gets pregnant again and she ends up fleeing and leaving the village. And it's crazy because why do the dictators always have a crazy origin story? Because now I'm thinking about the Saddam episode where shit went crazy before he was even on this planet. Why does it always go like the mother was pregnant, lost the child tragically, and then the second one comes after and he ends up being evil? Mobutu, there we go. Okay, so right back to Mobutu and his mom. So she flees the village and she ends up marrying this man who was a cook for a Belgian judge, which is a good gig to have at that time. And so Mobutu is born, and the man that she ends up marrying becomes Mobutu's stepdad. But unfortunately, he dies when Mobutu's pretty young, when he's around 8 years old. And historians say, biographers say, that Mobutu was very bright, very sharp, and really, really quick-witted. And because of this, the Belgian judge's wife sees something in Mobutu and decides to take him under her wing. So this woman really takes a liking to him and basically treats Mobutu like it's her own son. And she goes out with him. They're walking hand in hand. People are looking like, what the fuck is going on? Because again, this is under Belgian colonial rule in Congo at this time. And one thing she also does is give him intense French tutoring, which was a huge advantage for him to have. And personally, I would like some intense French tutoring myself right now because I was just there for a month and I take French lessons every week. It is still not there, and I feel like I don't know when it's ever going to be there, but I just know I'm trying. And if I pronounce something poorly in French this episode, just let it go, girl. I'm still working, okay? And that's another story for a different day, but learning French gave Mobutu a significant advantage because there was this concept at the time in colonial Congo called évoluer. It was a system of well-evolved, or and when I say well-evolved, I'm doing the finger quotes and I'm doing the quote-unquote evolved and developed Africans. And this is exactly how it sounds, extremely fucking racist. And it was using like this kind of socialist Darwinist framework in which the goal was for all Africans eventually, especially the ones in these colonies, to become évolués. And so someone who is an évolué is a person who defied the odds of, quote, again, primitive tribal traditions and successfully assimilated into European culture, which was ultimately the goal of colonization after, all the theft of the resources of the countries they were colonizing. And while there was technically no specific universal criteria for determining who exactly an évolué was, it was generally accepted that one would have a good knowledge of French, adhere to Christianity, of course, and have some form of post-primary education. Of course, they weren't necessarily allowing Congolese people to have university, graduate degrees, but something close to that by going to these Catholic seminaries or just joining the military after that. And évolués had a higher social status than regular black Congolese people, but they were still obviously below the Belgians. And they literally gave people cards called, and again, I'm going to speak French, so please be nice to me, carte de mérite civique, which gave them very limited privileges, but privileges a little bit. And those privileges were so limited that there was a second card on top of that called, and this one, just give me a second, the carte d'immigrant. Ooh, the carte d'immigrant. But there was a second card, okay? And the card was granted to those who obtained full legal equality with Europeans. So that was like the card to have. And so in order to get one of those, though, you needed to pass a lot of steps and jump through a lot of hoops. You needed a letter of recommendation from a European employer. You needed to pass an evaluation where they would visit candidates in their homes, examine their household items such as linen, silverware, make sure everything is proper, European, and also they would even watch how you ate to see if you ate, again, in a civilized manner, and even what you were eating. And then after that, a candidate and his wife, because it was only men who were able to do it at that time, had to appear in front of the head magistrate of the provincial court and answer a series of questions. Now, does that not sound fucking crazy to you? Well, of course it is, but again, that is colonial Africa at the time. And this whole system of évolués was not because they actually wanted Congolese people to become equal to them, because in their eyes, they're always going to be below. A black person, an African person is always going to be below a European, but we can get you guys close to where we are. Not exactly, but close enough. But this was also done to pacify them and to buy their loyalty, thinking that they would be satisfied with just being, slightly elevated, slightly better than the average person, and they weren't really going to complain about that. And they just thought they were going to be satisfied being junior Belgians, so to speak, for the rest of their lives. But this low-key backfired on them because eventually people became disillusioned, especially when people become more educated and they realize, like, okay, we've gotten more educated, we've gone through more schooling, and now that we're around more people of this upper echelon, this higher class, we're realizing that we still do not have any of the privileges that we should actually have. Especially given, again, this is their fucking country. This is Africa. It's like the same issue with apartheid where it's like, how are you in our country subjugating us? Should we not be subjugating you? Like, what is going on? And so they realized that none of this was actually really benefiting them, and they didn't really gain much from this aside from, again, just like perceived upper class. They still weren't considered equal to the Belgians, and they were still facing a lot of discrimination in Congo at the time. And probably one of the most important things is that they had no voice in the country's politics. No matter how far they rose in these kind of arbitrary classes, they still didn't actually have control and weren't able to exact any kind of change because they weren't the ones in the government positions holding any power. It was all the Belgians. They also had no rights to own any land, and they couldn't even travel freely throughout the country as they pleased. Again, their own country. And also at this time, there was still a lot of forced labor, aka slavery, happening in these rural areas, and people in urban areas were subject to curfews. And the reason why the Belgians were doing this was that they wanted the Congolese to be useful but not threatening. They truly thought the Congolese would be content being second-class citizens in their own country for the rest of their lives, or unless until the Belgians just wanted to go eventually. And what the Belgians didn't realize is that they trained their own replacements by doing that. They basically found the most intellectually driven and motivated people, educated them in European politics, and didn't realize that this evalué system brought a bunch of people together that had the intelligence and education to want to get rid of them. And that's exactly what ends up happening. And the person that was leading the charge at the beginning was not actually Mobutu, even though this is a Mobutu episode. It was a man called Patrice Lumumba. And Patrice Lumumba is getting his own episode, because I will be talking about him a lot, especially these next couple segments, because he's very, very heavily involved and very, very important to the beginning half of this story and Mobutu's uprising. But again, I'm going to get to him in his own episode because he deserves it, and there's so much more I want to get into with his personal story. So Lumumba, just like Mobutu, was not just an evalué, but he was the president of the local evalué club. He was also a clerk at the post office. But he was one of those people who became disillusioned with what was happening in the country and the system that they were in. And he was a staunch nationalist that made it his mission to seek immediate independence from Belgian colonial rule. And because he was such a prolific speaker and writer and captivated people with his speeches, he used his platform to speak up. He spoke about the discrimination that the Congolese people were facing in the country, the lack of equality, and spoke in great detail about the brutality of King Leopold's rubber plantations that, again, were still going on. The country's infrastructure and economy were heavily reliant on the forced labor of Congolese people, and Congolese people still being subjugated and not having any control and power. The plantations in which they were starving, mutilating, and killing thousands, if not millions of people over time. And so Patrice Lumumba is that guy. He is lighting a fire under Belgium's asses, and as you can imagine, they didn't like that. In 1956, he was arrested for allegedly embezzling money from the post office he was working at, and he spent a year in jail. But right after he gets out, he jumps back into politics immediately, and in 1958, he begins to organize the MMC, the Mouvement National Congolais. But what was so groundbreaking about him leading the MNC is that unlike other groups that were popping up around the same time, it wasn't necessarily focused on ethnic groups, because Congo's so big, there's all these different ethnic groups and regions around the countries that have, their own different interests and their own kind of dominance that they're looking for. He was more so focused on just overall Congolese independence, unity, and Africanization and Pan-Africanism in general. But then at the end of October 1959, he's arrested again for inciting an anti-colonial riot. And when that happens, people go crazy and demand for his release. And when he's in jail, he manages to somehow read an article in a weekly paper written for Congolese people by Congolese people. And the writer of said article was who? Joseph Desiree Mobutu. See how I landed that plane? I'll bring it back. So a bit of a rewind here. How do we go from a kid taken under the wing to this nice Belgian lady that wanted to help him out to a journalist? Well, because of his education and the benefits of him having such a strong command of French, he joined the Belgian Congolese army. And he actually had to join the Belgian Congolese army because he got expelled from school for fucking around. And because he spoke French so well, anytime the teachers who were primarily, I think their first language was Flemish, anytime they would say something incorrect in French, he would mock them and make fun of them because he's like, oh, how do I know French better than you? And he was getting into so much trouble at school. So he was expelled, and his only choice was to join the army. So he joins the Belgian Congolese army in 1949, and he goes from clerk to sergeant major, which is the highest rank that an African can have at the military at that time. And he was always more interested in reading and writing. And I think the most telling thing about him is that his favorite book was The Prince by Machiavelli. And this book is literally Dictator 101. I couldn't think of a more like trite, stereotypical thing for him to be reading. And if you don't know The Prince or Machiavelli, it's a book about how you basically have to be evil to achieve and keep up power. And he wholeheartedly believed in Machiavellian principles and ideas. The idea that it's more important to be feared than loved if you actually want to maintain control. So while he's in the army, he starts writing and starts contributing to these Congolese newspapers and ends up becoming a reporter and an editor for multiple different publications. And that is how he eventually links up with Lumumba, because again, while Lumumba was in jail, he was reading the writings of Mobutu, and they realized that they were kindred spirits. They have a lot in common. They both wanted Congo to be unified, and they both wanted Congo to be free from Belgian colonial rule. And also around this time, he marries his first wife, Marie Antoinette, aka Mama Mobutu. And that also, oh my goodness, gets so convoluted because he obviously, of course, takes on multiple different mistresses. Two of them were twins and has all these kids, but I'll get to that later on. So Mobutu and Lumumba get together, and Lumumba becomes something of a mentor to Mobutu at this time. And they're really growing each other's political beliefs together and seeing how they can band together to further their agenda of a free, independent Congo. In January of 1959, riots ensue after Belgian authorities ban a political rally in Leopoldville, and this leaves around 300 people dead. And things were getting so contentious that King Baudouin gets on the radio and promises Congolese independence, quote, without harmful procrastination. And I'm sure you're wondering, who the hell is this king you're talking about? And he is King Leopold's great-grandnephew, the king of the Belgians at that time. So naturally, this kind of proclamation requires action, and the Congolese hear this and they're trying to make moves. Like, they're thinking, okay, you're saying independence without procrastination? Let's get to work on this right now. Eventually, this leads into a roundtable discussion in Brussels with Belgian government officials. But the thing that the Congolese people don't know is that this is all just a stall tactic for the Belgians. In January 1960, they have this roundtable discussion where they were talking about next steps to take for Congolese independence and the plans they're going to make for Belgium to slowly exit out of Congo. And mind you, at this time where this roundtable discussion is about to happen, Lumumba is in jail again for the anti-colonial activity, but there's enough pressure for him to get an early release so he can be in Brussels, because at that point, he is the face of Congolese independence and he was driving a lot of this change. And so he and Mobutu are both present at this roundtable. And for the Belgians, again, this was all just lip service. They were doing this to pacify the Congolese people. They're just like, yeah, for sure. We're definitely going to give you guys the independence. Just hang on tight. We're going to iron everything over, smooth this all out, and then we're going to be out of your hair and you can be free. You can do whatever you want. Almost everything. Just give us some time to work on things on the admin side. And the Belgians weren't necessarily expecting the Congolese people to call their bluff, but the Congolese people absolutely call their bluff. They turn up their heat and they say, no, we want independence, and say, what? It's January 1960. We want independence by June 1st. Can we have 4 months? You think you can give us that in 4 months? And they're just like, okay, we are at a crossroads right now, because they're thinking if we immediately say yes and agree to all of these terms, we lose out on all this precious money, power, and the natural resources and forced labor that we're getting out of our precious colony. But again, if they say no, they're going to look like the assholes here. Because at this time, other African countries were slowly starting to work to gain independence, and the UN was also supporting these countries to have their independence as well. So they're just like, okay, we are going to look so bad if we say no to this, and we're going to look like the worst people here. So what can we do? Okay, how about instead of June 1st, can we have a couple more weeks? What about June 30th, 1960? And they're like, okay, we'll shake on it. That sounds good. But the Congolese don't know that behind their back, and so, while they're shaking their hands, the Belgian people, they cross their fingers and they're like, nope, sorry, it's not exactly what we said. Because their whole plan is to basically put the Congolese people in a 360 deal. Diet independence. They say, you can make a new flag, change your name, maybe repaint the Capitol building, have your fun. But we're actually going to keep all of the wealth in the country. And as I'm talking about it, I'm thinking about it, and it's literally like Scooby-Doo level villain behavior. It's very devious, but on like, an imperialist genocidal scale. Like, I don't want to like talk it down to like, oh, they're just like Scooby-Doo villains. Like, it was cartoonishly evil, but in the worst way imaginable, in the ways that I do not want to minimize. The horrors of Belgium. And also something that I want to clarify is that there are two Congos. There's the Democratic Republic of Congo that was colonized by the Belgians, and then there's the Republic of Congo that was colonized by the French. And the best way to differentiate them is Congo Brazzaville, which is French Congo, and then Congo Kinshasa, which is Belgian Congo. But either way, just wanted to make that distinction. Mobutu and Lumumba divide and conquer. After they find out, okay, our date for independence is going to be in 5 months, June 30th. Lumumba goes back to Congo to start planning an election because, of course, if they're going to be independent, we need to have a democratically elected leader. And so, meanwhile, back in Belgium, we're having the second part of a discussion, which is the most important. It's about the country's economy. And this is what I mean when I say cartoonishly evil, but on like a massive imperialist scale, because these are Belgian government officials talking to a group of evalués. These are very educated, sharp, and intellectual Congolese people, but think about all the systemic barriers that were placed to deprive them of actually getting further in their education. And the people they were talking to and negotiating with are the ones that were in charge of their education and controlled what they learned and deprived them of having any kind of real power in their country. They don't have any legal expertise. They don't have backgrounds in complex macroeconomics and international trade and finance, which are very important things when you are leading a country. And so just for context, so you understand just how insane this is, in Congo at the time in 1960, with a country of around 15 million people, only 30 Congolese people were university graduates. 30 out of 15 million people. So the Belgians are just like, why not let us just take care of all of this? Why not just have all of your corporate offices registered in Brussels? And they're like, okay, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. Let's just put it all in Brussels. That was a horrible idea. And that was a horrible idea because by registering these corporate offices in Brussels, all of that corporate tax money was going straight to Belgium and none of that was going to Congo. So all that money was going to Belgium to put mayonnaise on those nasty fucking French fries. Have you guys like ever been to Belgium or Amsterdam, or even like in some parts of like Paris and Germany where they have the fries that they put the mayonnaise on? I'm so sorry to the people that really fuck with that, but I think it's the worst. Like, I do not think mayonnaise should be a condiment for French fries. And I don't even think ketchup should be a condiment to have with French fries. I would rather just have the French fries plain, or not even have them. Like, why would you want to put mayonnaise? Okay, I'm veering off topic here. We're talking about very serious matters. But that was the first bad mistake they made in terms of Congo's finances. And then the other very, very crucial part of Congo's economy was going to be the natural and vast mineral resources, these copper, cobalt, and diamond mines. And they were thinking, what about all these mines, the ones that managed by us? And they were thinking, okay, all these things are managed by you, are managed by, these colonial rulers. Mobutu was thinking, obviously he was thinking this because he doesn't have a background in these massive corporate holding structures. He thinks, let's just get rid of all this colonizer shit. Let's get rid of it. Obviously, the mines are going to stay. The mines are literally the ones that are in the country. But it's like all the stuff that's controlled by the Belgians, let's just get rid of that. That's an even worse idea than the first one. By agreeing to legally dissolve the structure that was managing the mines at this time, what he actually agrees to is giving up Congo's majority control over their billion-dollar mining industry. They become minority shareholders for one of the most valuable assets in the continent and in their country. It's basically like when Oprah gave everybody in the audience free cars, but they didn't actually just get a free car. They had to pay the taxes on the car, and it wasn't free. I think a better example is actually the 360 deal. They gave up their biggest asset, their biggest bargaining chip, and didn't even realize it until it was too late. But again, you can't really blame them because they did not have any knowledge of these complex structures, but of course all the Belgians did. That's why I say cartoonishly evil. So as if enough people weren't already in Congo's business already, Now we enter the United States and the Soviet Union, and I'm going to go into more detail on that after this first commercial break. So now we're back from our brief commercial break, and it's time to talk about some good old-fashioned U.S. meddling, because at this time, this is all happening during the Cold War. And so, of course, anytime something bad is happening anywhere in the world, you can probably guess that the U.S. is going to be involved in some capacity, usually with the bad guys. And so the U.S. and the CIA were becoming very interested in what's happening in Congo, because Africa was a huge arena for proxy conflicts during the Cold War. And this is what they call the Congo crisis. The Eisenhower administration believed that the instability in Congo would give the Soviets opportunity to spread their sphere of influence in one of the biggest countries in Africa. And this was obviously a problem for the US because of the domino theory. If one nation becomes communist, all the neighboring countries around them will also become communist, and the whole world is going to become communist. And so the US had to do something about it. And guess who gets approached by the CIA? Mobutu. And so now, fast forward to Independence Day, June 30th, 1960. Congo gains independence from Belgium, kinda. So a man named Joseph Kasavubu becomes president, and our guy, Patrice Lumumba, becomes the prime minister. So Mobutu is also by his side as Secretary of State. And I wish I could say the story ended here, but as you heard me say, he was approached by the CIA, so this is literally just the beginning. So a week after they gain independence, literally a week after they gain independence, everything starts to fall apart and all gets worse from there. Even just thinking about it is giving me a headache. So a week later, Congo's Force Publique, their military, mutinies against the Belgian officers because they were thinking, okay, we're independent now. Why are you guys still here? Why are you in charge? Why have we not gotten an increase in our salaries? And why are you still treating us like shit? We're an independent nation now. Who do people think you are? What the fuck are you doing? And so the Belgians were like, who do you think you actually are? And the Congolese people were refusing orders. They weren't listening, and they were very obviously frustrated. And so the head officer, a man named Emile Janssens, brings them all together and says, I don't give a fuck or a damn about your independence. Nobody is getting promoted. Nobody's making any more money. Everything is going to stay the same, and we're not going anywhere. So all that little independent stuff y'all are talking about, so happy, fireworks, it means nothing around here. So get back to work. He literally gets a piece of chalk and writes on a blackboard in front of all these officers, before independence equals after independence. Nothing is changing. And that was a horrible, horrible miscalculation, because these people are independent now, and they're also heavily armed and not happy with you. So talking to them like that, thinking again they're just going to take it lying down and not fight back, was a bad idea. And then we get the rebellion and the mutiny begins. They start taking Belgian officers hostage, and they are raising hell, and it starts to spread very fast. People were rightfully upset because they thought independence was going to bring them immediate and visible improvement with their conditions as citizens of the Congo, but it was like nothing changed at all, and people were fed up. And at this point, it's not just the soldiers in the army, it's regular civilians too. Everybody is just pissed. And because all of this chaos is ensuing, and Belgian officers are being held hostage, and some are even killed, Belgium sends heavily armed troops to Congo, and that's also a bad idea as well, because Lumumba is seeing it as, you are basically forcing your way into our country. We're independent now. You guys can't just force your way into here and bringing all these heavily armed officers and artillery. We have to fight back. And so anytime there's this kind of chaos happening in a country, especially in African country, there are always people that are trying to take advantage secretly in the shadows. And I want to break down all the people that were doing that. So one of them is a man named Moise Chouambe. And he was a leader of a very important and big province in Congo called Katanga. Katanga held a third of the nation's wealth with all of their copper and cobalt mines, and these are the same mines that the Belgians and other European investors had just taken majority share of. And he wanted Katanga to have their own independence and become free from Congo and do their own thing. Remember how earlier I was saying that Lumumba really wanted to have one unified, tight Congo state, and there were people who were a part of different ethnic groups that wanted to have their own thing? He was one of those people. And he was also being backed by the Belgians. And so this was a very, very bad situation for Congo as a whole, because if Congo loses Katanga, they are absolutely screwed because they hold so much of the nation's wealth with all of these mines. And so what does Moise Tshombe do? He goes on TV and he declares independence from Congo. He says, we are seceding. We are Katanga. This is our thing. Y'all do your own thing over there. Good luck. We got the Belgians. Have a nice afternoon. And another person that was lurking in the shadows, secretly plotting, was, of course, Mobutu. At this time, he's starting to plant the seed of drama and influencing the power struggle between President Kasavubu and also Patrice Lumumba. Lumumba, again, wanted one unified, tight Congo state where everyone can just work it out and figure things out together. And Kasavubu didn't really care. He wanted more of a looser federation and was more willing to keep working with Belgium, which Lumumba, of course, did not want, at least in the capacity that Kasavubu did. And so Lumumba's just trying to keep it all together. He had so much hope for Congo and the future of a decolonized, unified Africa, and it was all falling apart right before his eyes, just weeks after Congo finally gained independence. And this is why I get so annoyed when people get on me about that fucking Gaddafi episode. When I tell you, to this day, there are still people who will DM me or comment on my TikTok posts saying that I'm wrong about Gaddafi and Gaddafi was a good guy. He was actually just trying to unify Africa together and wanted the best. And the evil Americans took him down because he just wanted to unify Africa. The evil Americans did help take him down. I'm not disputing that claim, but no, the person you think Gaddafi is, that's actually what Lumumba was. He had no cap in his rap. He was walking the walk and talking the talk in a way that Gaddafi just never did. At least not for a long enough time for me to ever take that shit seriously. So because Patrice Lumumba was trying to just smooth everything over and work things out with everybody, he tries to fly to Katanga to have talks with Tshombe. And I just realized I was pronouncing it Katanga, but it's actually pronounced Katanga. Tang like the drink. So he tries to fly there, but the Belgian army has blocked the airspace and they're controlling the airport and they won't even allow him to get in there. And he's like, okay, what the fuck am I going to do now? Like, I'm really just trying to figure everything out and make sure we can all work together. And I can't even talk to you. And let me zoom out a bit because I'm saying a lot of names here and there's a lot of different moving parts and I just want to clarify everything just one more time. So the country is falling apart very rapidly after they just received independence. Tshombe declares independence from Congo, and Katanga, one of the most important provinces in Congo, is now doing their own thing, which is very detrimental to Congo's economy, and Lumumba's trying to stop all the hemorrhaging that is going on. And while this is all going down, President Kasavubu is trying to get rid of Lumumba, and Mobutu is secretly supporting Kasavubu but playing both sides at the same time. And so because he's not able to speak directly to Moise Tshombe in Katanga because the Belgians are blocking him from getting in, he tries to get help from the United Nations to get rid of the Belgian troops for one, and also to stop Katanga from seceding from Congo. And because so much is going on during the Cold War at this time, the UN kind of just sees this and classifies it as an internal political conflict, something like a lover's quarrel, and we're just like, you know what? We're going to help the civilians, anything they're going through in the country at that time, but everything else is on you guys to work out on your own and figure it out. We're not going to get involved in that. So then, unfortunately, Patrice Lumumba makes a fatal error that ends up costing him his life, which is formally seeking help from the Soviet Union. And mind you, Lumumba was not even a communist. He didn't believe in the communist cause at all, really. He was a staunch nationalist and had his beliefs, but he was just desperate for any kind of help at this time, and he wasn't getting it from the UN, and he definitely was not going to get it from the US. And the US did not care about what his motivations were, whether he believed in communism or not. And mind you, he wasn't even a communist. He didn't necessarily believe in, the communist theories and idea. He was like a staunch nationalist, but he was just so desperate for help this time. anybody's help. And it didn't really matter to the US because, again, they believe that as soon as you align with the Soviets, whether you are embracing communism or not, you are an enemy of the United States. And that's literally how we got the Vietnam War. And the US had a lot at stake because as I was researching for this episode, I found out that the uranium that was used for the Hiroshima bomb came from Katanga. So again, Katanga is very, very, very important for everybody's interest. And so once the US finds out that the Soviets provided assistance and were delivering aid actually to Congo, they decide they have to get rid of Patrice Lumumba as fast as they can. And remember how I said when chaos ensues, people are secretly plotting in the background on how they can take over? The US was absolutely plotting too. They wanted to get rid of Lumumba, and they were thinking, okay, if we get rid of Lumumba, who can we install? Oh, Mobutu. So the US was in cahoots with Mobutu, and Mobutu was at a crossroads, so to speak. Does he stand 10 toes behind his good friend and mentor, Patrice Lumumba, who is going through hell right now and just trying to work everything out in Congo and is being targeted by both the Americans and the Europeans? Or does he decide to look out for himself and take the evil deal of a lifetime and allow himself to be installed into power by the United States, but that means it's going to cost the life of his friend Patrice Lumumba? Well, he takes the blue pill. Or honestly, the red pill. I don't know. I fall asleep when I watch The Matrix, so I don't really know what the red pill or the blue pill is. But either way, he takes the evil pill. That's what we know. So then on the 5th of September of 1960, President Kasavubu announces on the radio that he was dismissing Lumumba. That's a shock to everybody, including Lumumba. And Lumumba, he fights back. He goes on the radio and he declares that Kasavubu is going to be deposed. You want to get rid of me? I'm going to get rid of you. And so the parliament has to, be involved in this decision, and they are deadlocked. And the tensions are so high because they are literally on the precipice of disaster. The president and prime minister are doing the Spider-Man pointing meme and trying to get rid of each other at the same time. The Belgians are still involved. The United States is involved. France is involved. And everybody is just trying to dig their hands into Congo's pockets. And so Mobutu's like, you know what? I'm stuck in the middle of this because both of them, Lumumba and Kasavubu, are calling Mobutu independently and saying, you need to arrest him. You need to arrest him. And Mobutu's thinking, okay, this is my chance. And so he says, you know what? Instead of arresting both of you two, I'm going to just kind of, take a step back here, and we're going to neutralize the situation. I'm going to neutralize both of you guys. So let's just figure this all out. And what he just did was a good old-fashioned bloodless coup, Gaddafi style. He didn't have to, do anything crazy, have the military take over. He just like, you know what, we're going to neutralize this. We're going to neutralize this. So once Mobutu takes on this soft power, he brings President Kasavubu back, and he puts his good friend Lumumba under house arrest. And this is where things are really going to start to take a turn, because then Patrice Lumumba tries to escape, but he was eventually captured on the 1st of December, 1960. And on the 17th of January, 1961, he was flown to Katanga and killed that night on Moise Chowombe's territory with Belgian officers present. And I don't even have words. And there's obviously so much to the story that I'm leaving out, like a whole hour of a story that I'm leaving out. And his assassination was done in such a cruel, violent fashion. And I promise I'm not purposely skipping over all of this just to talk about Mobutu. I want to give Lumumba his own specific episode for himself, probably the one right after this. So I promise I'm not glazing over it. I'm not skipping over all the atrocities that were committed against him. I just want to, give him his own dedicated episode because he deserves to have that. And again, even just thinking about what they did to him and what ensued after in Congo, almost makes you want to cry. I'm even tearing up here. I need my assistant. Can I please have a tissue? There's literally nobody in here but me. But it makes me want to cry because literally all he wanted was an independent, unified Congo where they could finally live up to their potential and their power that they had. They had so much power as a country and all of these vast natural resources. And there were so many educated, intelligent people in Congo that he thought would finally get the chance to shine in the country. And that just did not happen. And he wrote this final letter to his wife before he was assassinated, where he was, again, just like kind of talking about all these things, about how he, finally wanted to have a unified Congo that can finally live in their own dignity without colonial. Like, I'm literally about to cry. I need a second, actually. Hang on. And okay, wait, damn. I actually am starting to tear up here a little bit. This was supposed to be, again, the great hope for Africa. This is one of the biggest countries in Africa, and everything just fell apart so quickly right after that. I just want to repeat, Congo gained independence June 30th, 1960. Patrice Lumumba is prime minister, not even a year into him being the prime minister. At less than 40 years old, he is assassinated by Belgium. So let's take a little brief break. Okay, we are back. Mobutu. So he pulls off one of the greatest heists ever and declares himself as president. He's the guy that's finally going to make Congo great, and he uses Machiavellian tactics to consolidate and solidify his power as supreme leader. Remember, it's better to be feared than loved. Lumumba was loved, and look what happened to him. They killed him. So he has to be feared, right? And so to maintain absolute power, you have to rely on fear. So Mobutu starts doing all the classic dictator tricks. First one being, get rid of your enemies, and then get rid of the people who you perceive as enemies. They might not even be an enemy yet. They might not be an enemy at all, but it's like, we have to kill you just to make sure people know I'm fucking crazy and you can't mess with me. And so he has to put, the fear of God in everyone so people fall in place with the regime. And so he starts targeting 4 important politicians in Congo at that time and accuses them of treason and wants to have them killed. But he doesn't just kill them. He creates this massive public spectacle and has them executed in front of a crowd of around 100,000 people. And one of these people, their execution was botched, and literally thousands of people were watching as this man was struggling after being hung for 20 minutes, literally fighting for his life until he finally died. And despite the thousands of people that were in attendance, you could hear a pin drop and people were freaking the fuck out. And now that he's instilled the fear of God and not just, the politicians, but regular Congolese citizens, he decides it's time for the more fun dictator stuff, starting with his policy of authenticité. So let's make Congo more African and shed all that European shit. So he changes the name of the country from the Democratic Republic of the Congo to Zaire. And he changes the name of the Congo River to the Zaire River. He changes the currency to the Zaire. And the word Zaire itself, and if you are watching the video right now, which I will be posting, I never post the videos, but I will be posting the video. If you can see my jersey right now, let me move the mic really quickly. I am wearing a Zaire jersey. This, I believe, is from 1994, before they got the name Congo again eventually, but I'm wearing my Zaire jersey for support. Shout out to all my Congolese, any Congolese people listening to this episode. Hey, hello. The word Zaire itself is a Portuguese mispronunciation of the word Nzer. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And based on what I've read, that is a Kikongo word that translates into the river that swallows all rivers. The Congo River, which turned into the Zaire River. And he also Africanizes the name of major cities, Leopoldville and Stanleyville, which were horrible fucking names, by the way. How fucking lazy are you? Leopold, Stanley, are you serious? So he changes those names to Kinshasa and Kisangani. So then he says, you know what? Matter of fact, we're not going to just change the name of the country. We're going to change the name of everybody, including myself. Let me lead by example. So he goes from his European Christian name, Joseph Desiree Mobutu, to a more Africanized name, Mobutu Sese Seko. He actually has a much longer name, but for all intents and purposes, we're going to call him just his name, Mobutu Sese Seko. And he tells everybody, Africanize your name. I don't know, I don't care which name you pick, but just make it more African. I don't want to hear any European names around here, please. And not just this, but he also demands people change their style of dress. No more Western European suits. I don't want to see a suit and a tie. I want you wearing some African attire. And if you're not going to wear some African attire, because he changes his attire as well, he starts wearing the traditional abacost, which was inspired by Chairman Mao Zedong of China, the People's Republic. And along with his abacost, he also starts wearing his signature, which is his leopard hat. And it's so funny because he, at this point, is literally getting, his police officers and military to snatch people up for wearing Western attire and doing all these small, ridiculous things. But secretly, not even secretly, he is obsessed with European luxury and French opulence specifically. So another important step on doing all the fun dictator stuff is building yourself a massive compound. He builds this massive compound basically in the jungle in his ancestral hometown called Gabadolit. And this palace is insane. I'm talking Italian marble, basically all gold everything, sexy Spanish tiles. He's drinking vintage pink champagne. Of course, he's got a fleet of German cars, BMW, Mercedes, and of course you have to have a sexy supersonic Concorde jet. And he was using this jet to fly all of this stuff from Europe in and also to fly his family out for these very lavish and expensive European shopping sprees and vacations. Despite the fact that he hates Europe so much, so to speak, or at least so they think, he has 20 different residences around Europe, from Spain to Portugal to Brussels, and of course in Paris. He's got places all over. And it's honestly such a shame that Mobutu ended up being so evil and did such terrible things, because he was a man after my own heart and he loved a good dinner party, a nice lavish dinner party. And he also had a very fabulous wine cellar. They say he had one of the best wine cellars in the world. And he loved flying in top chefs from around the world. He loved flying in pastry chefs from France to come and cook for him and all of his special guests, including very fabulous A-listers of questionable moral character like Pope John Paul II, Ronald Reagan, and Don King. Yes, that Don King. Boxing Don King. In fact, Mobutu financed the iconic Rumble in the Jungle fight between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman in Zaire in 1974. A fight that he didn't even go to because probably he was afraid of getting assassinated in a huge crowd of people. And he probably saw it as a flex of yeah, I'm putting together this massive, huge fight everybody's watching, but I don't even need to be there. I'm just going to watch it from my palace. And he's on a sick one in 1974, if I really think about it. So he hosts Rumble in the Jungle. He also hosts a 3-day music festival called Zaire 74 to promote the fight with famous artists like B.B. King, James Brown, and even Celia Cruz. And in 1974, Zaire becomes the first sub-Saharan African country to qualify for the World Cup. And again, as you can see, I'm wearing a Zaire jersey right now if you're watching this on video. And despite the fact that, they get this major accomplishment of becoming the first sub-Saharan African country in the World Cup, which, starts building the foundation of Africa in the World Cup as a whole, they lose every single match in the group stage and didn't score a single goal. They ended up conceding 14 goals during the entire group stage. Their worst match, they got scored on 9 times. That was pretty fucking bad. And the players on the team are terrified for their lives because Mobutu and, the other people in charge told them that if you lose your next match against Brazil by more than 3 goals, you are not going to be able to come home safe. So you better not do anything crazy. But something crazy happens, of course. But I'm going to get into that. I think I'm going to make a separate YouTube video. Probably going to do a Patreon for sure, going into more detail on a lot of things, especially Mobutu, the wives, the children, all of that, and all the other things, and how it kind of all relates to what's happening in Congo right now. But bad things happened. And this episode is already too long at this point. There's so much that I'm cutting out, but as I'm recording this right now, I'm looking at the monitor. I'm an hour and 26 minutes in, and I still have 3 pages of notes left. So I'm going to get to all of this. But I would love to make an episode or just a YouTube video about the corruption in African football, because there is so much to say, but it really does mirror what's happening in real life right now. But, since we're talking about Congo, while I have you all here, I was talking about Mbappe at the beginning, right? Okay, so it's very interesting because this was Congo's first time qualifying for the World Cup this year in 2026 since 1974 when Mobutu was leading the country of Zaire. So it was their first time back. And so this was a very historical moment for them. And also something that the Congolese team had, there's this fan that would go to all the matches, like all the qualifying matches and even like some of the World Cup matches. This man named who they call Lumumba Vea, and he basically has this bit where he's a living statue. He dresses up as Patrice Lumumba and he stands like a statue for like an hour of the game, like literally just standing there like a statue, right? And it's cool because, you know, people love him. Also, a new generation of people are learning about who Patrice Lumumba is. And, you know, he also sees it, the man, Lumumba Vea, he sees it as his patriotic mission to express historical national identity of Congo. And then you have, and while this is all happening, Congo being back in the World Cup, this Lumumba Vea guy standing like Patrice Lumumba, we also have this Mbappe dictator meme. I know you know what I'm talking about. Even if you didn't watch the World Cup, if you were online, you probably either heard that Kylian Mbappe dictator song or you've seen like the AI dictator memes. And that is basically based off of Mobutu, and even his teammates like jokingly called him Mobutu. And it's fine again because he can joke about it, his teammates can joke about it, and it's fine. But I'm just like, maybe I'm the friend that's too woke, but I'm just like, some of y'all, I don't know if I like y'all calling him dictator. I don't know if I like y'all calling him Mobutu. The teammates, his friends, that's one thing. But I don't want to hear members of the French far right party calling him dictator. Because y'all act, I don't want y'all calling him anything. So shut the fuck, like, I don't want to hear it. But either way, again, let me not get too much into it, but I'm just like, And also, one more thing about that Lumumba Vea guy. Something I also think is weird, and again, I'm not Congolese, so if you're Congolese, please speak up and let me know how you feel. But during the World Cup, I was on Francophone Twitter and kind of seeing what people were saying just during the entire time. And Lumumba Vea also was doing ads. Like, he did an ad for this deodorant company, and I was like, it's not weird that he's doing an ad. It's weird that he's doing an ad dressed up as a political leader that was assassinated, and he's, you know, doing an ad on his behalf basically for commercial purposes. And then also during the World Cup final, after all the things that were happening during the World Cup, they like briefly showed Lumumba Vea, and I'm just like, I don't even think Lumumba Vea was allowed entry into the United States. But either way, let me not dive too deep into that. Let me save that for the Patreon. I gotta save something. But let's wrap Mobutu up. So he has created a kleptocracy that is driving Congo into financial disrepair. He is seizing thousands of businesses and treating the country like his personal piggy bank. He's passing off these complex supply chains and industries in his countries to his friends and associates that have absolutely no experience in any of these things, and the supply chains freeze and shit kind of just falls apart. And because Mobutu has very expensive tastes, the country is in massive, massive debt due to his overspending and the mismanagement of funds. And throughout the 80s and the 90s, hyperinflation is so bad in Zaire that at one point the currency was virtually worthless. 5 million Zairean dollars was worth about 2 USD. 5 million was worth 2 USD. Worth less than the Argentinian peso right now, which is already pretty bad, no offense. But things were pretty bad at Congo, again, because of Mobutu stealing money from his country. And mind you, at this point, the Western government is aware of all of these things. The Western governments and all these banks, they knew what was going on, and they just kept, financing it and extending his credit line and just kind of watching it all happen because, it is what it is. We can focus on that later. And Mobutu takes advantage of this because he knows the West is terrified of him aligning with the Soviet Union and weaponizes the situation to his advantage. An example of this way that he was weaponizing the whole Soviet-US situation was the Angolan Civil War. So at this time in the early to mid 1970s, Angola is being taken over by a Marxist group that's starting to gain traction throughout the country. And Mobutu, of course, is supporting the non-Marxists, but he needs more cash and aid from the West. and ask the Americans for more money. And they're just like, and the US is like, how dare you? Bitch, we just lost the Vietnam War. We spent billions of dollars on a war we lost fighting communism, and you want us to give you more money? Please go ask somebody else. We can't take this on right now. And so he's like, oh, go ask somebody else. So he's like, I'm not going to go ask somebody else. I'm going to concoct a devious plan. And that's exactly what he does. So he pulls a pump fake on the US government, and he claims that the US ambassador to Zaire is planning to stage a coup and assassinate him. He crashes out. He has a newspaper publish these fake stories about how the US is trying to get rid of him. And so he drives the ambassador out of the country and threatens to seek help elsewhere, aka with the Soviet Union. Again, I say 1-800 call my bluff. And Henry Kissinger is freaking out because he's like, okay, wait, no. I know we said we weren't going to give you the money, but we cannot have anybody aligned with the Soviets. So we're actually going to send that check. We are so sorry about that. Let us know when the check goes through because we can't have this happen. So he gets the money. And he gives a little bit of money to the Angolan fight, but he obviously pockets the rest of the money for himself, which is exactly what he wants, and the U.S. falls for it hook, line, and sinker. And I'm sure you're wondering, why does the U.S. care about Angolan Marxists taking over? They were again freaking out because of this domino theory. And it's very important because if Congo aligns with Angola and becomes communist as well, the domino theory will happen because Congo borders 9 different countries. If they get one, they're going to get the rest, and that is going to be very bad, and they will lose Africa. But also, while this is all happening, regular Congolese people are living in fear, and they are really, really struggling. They thought, again, we're independent now, we're free from the Belgian colonial rule, things have to have improved in the country. And they did improve slightly, but things were still very, very bad. And he's actively having people kidnapped, disappeared, tortured, and even killed for speaking about him, even in the slightest. But eventually, when you do clownery, the clown comes back to bite. I'm looking at every camera's head. You see me, you see me, you see me. When you do clownery, the clown comes back to bite. You can't rely on the fear of the people forever, and he realizes this when one of his close personal friends, Nicolae Ceausescu, president of Romania, and also his wife, were executed by a firing squad on Christmas Day on TV. This happens in 1989, and Mobutu is slowly freaking out because he realizes they both use a lot of the same similar dictator tactics. And again, they were really close friends as well. So he's like, oh no, I might be in danger. Let me start fixing this as fast as possible. And he feels the walls closing in on him, so he tries to smooth things over so people don't turn on him. But people are fed up. And he still wasn't actually expecting people to rise up against him, but people just don't fucking care anymore. They are mad. The country they thought was finally going to be free of Belgian colonial rule has fallen into the hands of a kleptocratic dictator. So in 1990, he decides it's time for a rebrand. Let's put an end to this, single party state, and let's transition into a real democracy that's a multi-party state where everybody, has a chance. And so what does he do? He's like, you know what? Instead of, just, relinquishing power, giving all of this up, and letting an actual democratically led election being held, he's like, actually, what I'm going to do instead is manufacture my own civil unrest in the country. So he secretly orders his military units to go into the streets and start rioting, looting, and destroying the infrastructure of the country. And I'm sure you're wondering, why would he purposely fuck up the country? And he was doing this because he was like, you guys want democracy? If you want democracy, this is what things are going to look like when I'm gone. So let's rethink this plan, guys. Why don't we do that? And so then, in the fall of 1991, Congo is once again in shambles with violence, looting, and just total destruction. And it's a nightmare that doesn't even work out like he wanted to. But the final straw for all of this, Mobutu's real end, didn't even come just from, the situation happening in Congo. It actually came from the Rwandan genocide, where Hutu extremists murdered the Tutsi people in Rwanda. And Belgium is also responsible for that one as well. But we don't even have enough time to get into this at that point. That's another story for a different day. So long story short, he allowed the Hutu refugees and armed militias that murdered and were torturing these Tutsi people to come into Zaire and take camp. And this led to Rwanda launching the first Congo War, where they were targeting the rebels that had fled into Congo. So during this time, a rebel group called the AFDL rose to power, led by a man named Laurent Desire Kabila, and he tried to get rid of Mobutu 30 years ago with Che Guevara, which, again, another story for a different day. That didn't pan out, but now he sees it's time for me to finally get my lick back and do this. And this is finally the end of Mobutu's reign of terror. And yes, I said it, reign of terror. And after everything that happened, it's finally over for him. And the AFDL takes control of Zaire with very little pushback because at this point, the military is not even doing anything. They hadn't been paid and they were just fighting for their lives at that point, stealing, looting, trying their best to make whatever kind of money they can. And they would do that and then take off their uniforms and kind of throw them away and get into civilian clothes so they weren't, taken by the AFDL, because the AFDL was getting the Zairean military force and rounding them up and killing them or kidnapping them. And so now it's time for Mobutu to finally face the music. The military that was doing all this for him, they don't care anymore, and they're gone. And so not only is he forced to flee Congo in May of 1997, he's also being ravaged by a very, very intense prostate cancer at this time. And before he flees Congo, he does something which is genuinely crazy and asks for his mother's remains to be exhumed so he can leave with her bones. And so he leaves Congo, he flees, and at first he goes to Togo, and then he ends up settling the rest of his life, which was ultimately just 4 more months, in Morocco. And so after all of this insane story, this rise to power, and this very, very bad fall, he dies in exile in Morocco of prostate cancer on September 7th, 1997, and he's still buried there in Morocco to this day. And I'm sure there's going to be some Mobutu sympathizers online. There always are. If there's Gaddafi sympathizers, there's for sure going to be some Mobutu sympathizers. But this man deliberately maintained a state of instability in this country for his own financial gain. He used the country like a piggy bank and did not actually care about creating a unified, progressed Congo where people were actually receiving the freedoms that they were promised and their country was in disrepair all over again. This man allowed his country to be used by the West as a chess piece during this proxy war between the US and the Soviet Union, which is very, very unfortunate. And just like I talked about in the Saddam Hussein episode and also in the Haiti episode, when this kind of thing happens and, a dictator like this is killed and military forces or rebel groups take over, this leads into a power vacuum, and this power vacuum has caused the state of disrepair that still remains in Congo to this day. But that is a story of Mobutu. But wow. Wow, 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 wow. It's just such a shame to me because, again, just like Iraq, just like Haiti, and now just like Congo, the same story gets repeated again. And just like all those other countries, Congo is in a terrible state currently. And it's truly a shame what's going on now. This episode is already very, very long. So I would love to get into more of what's happening in Congo now, but I think I'm going to save that for a Patreon episode where we can get more into that. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Fatu, and this is Dinner Party History for all the people that patiently wait and know I am a deadbeat. I'm so sorry. Now that the World Cup is over and I had my cute little summer holiday in France, it's time to lock back in. And again, now that I'm out of my 9-to-5 job, I have more free time to record. So I want my next episode to be about Patrice Lumumba. It's also going to be another very, very heavy topic, but I at least want to make some time to talk about Lumumba, his theories, his beliefs, his legacy, and what he wanted to happen for not just Congo, but Africa. And maybe, after that, get into some more whimsical topics. But there's so much history to discuss. That's the fun part about it, is that I'm never going to run out of topics to discuss. History is happening every day. But again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for rocking with me and supporting me. If you like this episode and you like the podcast and want to support, the best way you can do that is by leaving a 5-star review or leaving some comments on Spotify, or if you're watching this on YouTube, give me a like, some comments as well, and share it with your friends, your family. But thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate you all. Bye.